fan fiction. I love fan fiction. Just in case anybody cannot read what's on the screen, there is a picture that says, "This bad boy can fit so many of my hopes, dreams, fantasies, insecurities, personal traits, and traumas into it." And they're pointing at the logo of AO3, which is one of the most popular fanfic websites. And if the thing changes for me, it would be helpful. But what exactly is fanfic? Fanfiction is when people write stories based on already existing media. So this definition on Urban Dictionary was fan fiction is when someone takes either the story or characters of a certain piece of work, whether it be a novel, TV show, movie, etc., and create their own story based on it. Sometimes people take characters from one movie and put it into another, called a crossover. Most people who bash fan fiction are not willing to look past the fact that it's based on something else, and it could be worth reading if you like this subject. If you don't like the subject, you're not going to like the fanfic. And it's so true. But the origins of it, just all these jokes when it comes to fanfic of it is cringy, it is awful, it is desperate teenage girls hiding in their rooms writing about boys they wish they had. I'm not saying I was not one of those teenagers that hid in my fan fiction, but it's not just that. There's a lot of people will point out the idea that fan fiction, if you take it on its pure basis of it being based on pre-existing media, we already have so many examples of that. One that I actually mentioned recently in book club is Dante's Inferno. People joke about that being a self-insert fanfic of the Bible, and there is Christian theology, but we see retellings of so many stories, so many fairy tales get retold, so many the likes of Sherlock Holmes, all this jazz. But fan fiction, the way that it's sort of talked about on the internet, is from a non-profit community thing, and modern fan fiction has Star Trek to thank. So what we see as fan fiction at the moment can directly be tied back into the original Trekkies writing stories, most prominently Kirk and Spock, and publishing these stories collectively into different magazines, which were fanzines, and they gained popularity, and it was quite culty and it was quite small, but they are still very important to so many Star Trek fans, and it is the culture that started off what is now this huge movement of artists that come together to celebrate the media they love and share it in just a way that just no capitalizing off it. It's just to share joy and to share your interest, and there's something really beautiful about that for me. But as I said, it's getting a bit more mainstreamy, which is so bizarre to me. It really feels really weird to me that, like, if you had told teenage me that who was like in their room printing off pages of fanfics to like read under the covers at night and writing them randomly, that it would get so popular that I could say the word fanfic and the majority of people would know what I'm talking about, I probably would have laughed. I'm not gonna lie. But we Neil Gaiman, I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan. Many authors, some authors have been known to bash fan fiction. Somebody asked Neil Gaiman over on Tumblr, do you consider fan fiction legitimate writing? And Neil had this to say: I won the 2004 Hugo Award for Best Short Story for a H.P. Lovecraft's Arthur Conan Doyle mashup fiction. So fan fiction had better be legitimate because I'm not giving the Hugo back. Or the 2005 Locus Award for the Best Novelette. I'm not giving that back either. I don't think I know a single person who would dispute that Neil Gaiman is not a real writer. The same people that have given me stick about writing fanfic, nobody would say that about Neil Gaiman. And more so, we are seeing more and more popular fan fictions actually then being publicized as real novels. So the biggest example of this in recent years was 50 Shades of Grey. Not saying I'm for or against 50 Shades. I'm not. What I am saying is whatever year that was, let's be honest, everybody was fucking reading it and everybody was talking about it. And I got the joy of going around and telling everybody, did you know that it originally started as Twilight fan fiction? And seeing the look of confusion on people's face. So many books and famous films, TV shows now there's more and more of them that were originally based on legitimate fan fiction. The Love Hypothesis is a really popular book at the moment that is based on Kylo Ren, and I cannot think of her name right now, but yeah, damn it,
Right.
Thank you, Ray. There's actually of the 10 most popular fanfics turned books in the last 2 years, something like 4 of them were Kylo Ray pairings. After is it is based on a One Direction fan fiction, City of Bones, or Shadowhunters. Some people may know it because that was a really popular Netflix show. That was based on a Ginny Draco fan fiction. It is much more mainstream than people think about it. And there's lots of benefits to fanfic, in my opinion. I am going to say that. But this meme here says, fan fiction is the literal embodiment of if you want something done right, do it yourself. And yeah, there is that. The fix-it category in fanfics are one of the biggest categories where they take an ending of a TV show, movie, whatever, and change it to the way people think it should have. Very huge in certain fandoms that people do not feel they were satisfied with the ending. The rest of this meme says, damn Stray. Well, it's definitely not Stray. And this brings me on to my other benefit of fan fiction. Representation. Yes, we are getting more and more positive representation in the media nowadays. And I know, I am totally aware that most of you are probably fed up with hearing me talk about representation at this stage. However, let's remember that representation is the theme of this year's Neuro Pride. But even yesterday, I was reading a story and one of the characters had synesthesia. And I was like, oh yeah, well, that's something I've never encountered in fiction. We get all these representations of all these different neurodivergencies, disabilities. Most of my first encounter with queer culture in fiction was through fan fiction. Now, can our representation improve when it comes to fan fiction? Of course. I know we talked in one of the meetups about sapphic representation in fan fiction, and just because I love a good fact, AO3, the biggest platform, every year they release the top 100 stats. So the top 100 couples, well, like what people paired as couples, and they break them down into the gender, race, all this jazz, what shows they were from. Last year, in the top 100 relationships, pairings, 69 of them were male-male parents, 15 were female-male, and 4 were female, and then 12 were down as other. When it comes to other, that could be non-binary, it could be, some people would put down trans. I'm not getting into that. And then also sometimes it could be these people are technically a couple, but the story is not focusing on that, therefore I'm putting it down as other. But so while we have amazing gay representation there, 69% of the 100 most reoccurrent shippings in AO3 were gay male shippings. Like only 4% were sapphic shippings. 4%. And if you go over the whole website, it's even lower again. And this causes the likes of, there just be themed months a lot of times in the fanfic communities. In recent years, Sapphic September has grown popularity, where people are encouraged to write stories that include women who love women. So yes, it gets great representation. It's some of the first encounters of representation I encountered were through fan fiction. The other thing is this meme reads, fan fiction is so wild because I'm not in the mood to read a book, but I've just read 82,000 word fic instead. I am a devil for being like, I haven't read anything. And one of my partners will be like, how many words have you read in fan fiction this week? I was like, that's besides the point. And they're like, no, you constantly tell people that fan fiction is a valid form of writing, therefore you have to acknowledge that you are doing a valid form of reading. Anyway, so the rest of the meme reads, to start a book, you have to make room in yourself for new characters, new worlds. Do I look like I have the emotional energy for that? Do I look like I can trust that right now? Just show me the things that I already know pays good returns on my investments. Except I also want to read something new. So I guess they can be in a coffee shop this time. And I really resonate with that, because it takes a lot of emotional energy for me to learn about new characters and to invest my time in new characters. And I know that may seem silly if you look at it from a neurotypical lens, but I think it's very relatable from a neurodivergent lens, needing to learn, needing to concentrate. Whereas going back to Dean and Cass, it's just like going back for a hug off my favorite friends, you know, this type of way. And also, when it comes to Archive of Our Own, it's the website I use the most. They are so on the ball when it comes to tagging stories. I know what I'm getting myself into. I know if I am walking into something that has trigger warnings, I can explicitly, when I am searching for a new story, I can explicitly say, I do not want stories with X, Y, and Z in it. I do. There's some topics that are currently not okay for me to engage in a safe manner. So I exclude them from my search engines. I don't have that luxury with books. However, books are now more and more commonly starting to use trigger warnings, especially from smaller, more independent authors, and it's getting more common, which is amazing. But many literature people are accrediting this to fanfic, and you do see a shift in the mainstream reading paradigm when you compare it to the way fanfic works. People have researched this, and there is a direct correlation of things that get popular in fan fiction tend to become more popularized. And sometimes that is just a trope, like, oh, they slept in the same bed because there was only one bed left at the hotel. And sometimes that's in allowing consensual consumership of laying out the triggers for your audience. I find that so helpful and so important. And as a writer, I shouldn't say I'm a writer. I don't, no. As a writer, I write a lot of different things. I write poetry, I write blogs, I write fiction. I also write fan fiction. What I will say, in credit to writing fan fiction over writing anything else, there's such a supportive community within the fandoms that I am part of, that I would post something on AO3 and then I would get comments and I get constant feedback. There's many challenges where you can pair up with other writers and you are helping each other build a story, or pair up with artists and they're drawing different pictures to go along with your story. Like, it's a community, and I know we talk about community all the time, but it is so important for a reason. And yes, like everything, there is toxic parts of that community, but it is that balance of trying to find the safetyness within it. But yes, so benefits of fan fiction, in my opinion: good representation, I get the comfort, I get the trigger warnings, and I get my community, and I get my Destiel and all the queer rep and all the shipping I need. But that's more frivolous than the other stuff. So this is me basically done. I'm just going to end you on some nerdy stuff. I know everything else was quite geeky, but this is the more nerdy stuff. As I said, fan fiction can be tied into real world consequences for the betterment for a lot of things. There has been several studies done about this. One that was very interesting, which inspired a book called Dubcon, talked about the rise of the tag dubious consent in fan fiction. However, as that is a very triggering topic, I did not want to go into that tonight, but I will put these links in the chat if anybody is curious about it. Archive of Our Own is a branch off of Organization for Transformative Works. This is a fan-led, fan-owned organization that is there for the fans. It works mostly in America, but other places. And one of the main things that they actually had a real life, we seen real life change. When I talk about when I was a teenager, fan fiction was much more culty than what it is now. It's not even just the internet is making it more accessible. It was much more explicitly illegal. But since then, there has been several legislative changes, especially in America. But because most of those big names work out of America, you know, this type of way, which allows fan fiction to be in place if it's not profiteering, and then it's grayer when you get into the profiteering side of things. But when I was reading fanfic as a teen, every fic started with, I do not own the rights to this character, these stories, blah, 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 blah. And they were very, and with the delegalization of the fanfic within the American system, it did make it much more accessible online. And legal advocacy is another subsection of the Transformative Works organization, which they literally have lawyers and stuff that volunteer their time to help defend fan works. And I just think that is amazing. Like, I just love, there's also a website, I forgot to list it there, that the whole thing is about cataloging the history of the culture of fanfic. And I just think that's so beautiful that people are dedicating their time. AO3 went down a few weeks ago. It turns out it was being hacked, and volunteers worked around the clock to get it back. up and running. It's fascinating, honestly. You should look up the attack of AO3 2023, because I could go on for ages just on that alone. And then the other thing, which is the thing that I find amazing, but I'm not going to nerd out about it because honestly, I'm yet to find anybody that's interested in this, but however, they actually have a peer-reviewed academic journal where people taught, where, as I mentioned, there is many studies done into fan fiction and all this jazz. And there is an actual journal where people publish peer-reviewed articles and stuff like this. And there's some colleges in America that offer scholarships for fanfic writing, and even on a literary course in, I think, oh, I'm not going to say the college because I could be wrong, but definitely a literature course in America, fanfic is studied. An immortal, my immortal, oh yeah, is studied. Like, it's just, teenage me would not believe how big fanfic has gotten, and I love that. And I love that so many people now get to enjoy stories in ways that they are finding more accessible, ways that they can see themselves more in the characters, and they get to explore creativity themselves. I love that. And I love that people take this serious enough, that there are websites, there are groups, there are legal people, there are peer-reviewed journals. That to me is just peak fandom. And yeah, I'm done. I'm sorry.